Welcome to Integrity Matters by Turnitin vidcast. I'm joined today by Professor Helen Huntly, Provost at Central Queensland University. Helen, thank you for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
The pleasure is all ours. I would like to start with how and why you decided to work in education. Could you tell me a little bit about that?
I certainly could. So I grew up on a sugarcane farm in a rural area in the Wide Bay, so not too far from Central Queensland. And in those days, there was a tiny little one-teacher school. So my primary school had a total of 21 students, was our maximum enrolment when I was in Year 7. And I saw over the period of, we only had 2 teachers over that 7 years, and they really invested themselves heavily in the community. Both were male teachers, married. They brought their families. They had children while they were teaching in this little rural school. They really got involved in the community and started up parents and friends organisations, did a massive amount. And I guess from that really early age, even though I didn't realise it at the time, somewhere locked away in my brain was the notion of how important education is in a community and how important really good teachers are, engaged teachers in that community. So I can remember as an 8-year-old, my mum laughs about this still, as an 8-year-old with a desk and a chair in the middle of the road outside. Luckily it was a dirt road and it just led to the farm, with a blackboard and chalk, and my poor little brother, who would have been 4 at the time, sitting down, and me pretending that I was the teacher and he was to be a good student. So it wasn't difficult at all, right through primary school and then through high school. I really wanted to be a good teacher. I had a fantastic physical education and health teacher in high school, and she was interested not just in student learning, but she was interested in us as students, as segregated classes in those days. So as young women making their way in the world, she really was supportive and wonderful. And at that stage, I thought, I want to be a teacher. I want to be a phys ed teacher. So that's what I did.
Great. And what led you to your position and your role at university, at Central Queensland University, to be specific?
So look, it's been a long and wonderful career. So I finished my, in the late 70s. In those days, there was no such thing as a degree straight at university. It was Teachers Training College, and we received a diploma, graduated with a diploma. I taught for a little while in Brisbane, didn't like the city terribly much and really wanted to get back to the roots in regional and rural Queensland. So I was transferred after a few years to Bundaberg and loved my teaching in Bundaberg, but I then met my now husband, and I was going to transfer a little bit further north, and I thought, let's just see how this goes. Anyway, 35 years later, it went pretty well. So I was teaching at a high school, North Bundy High School in Bundaberg, and I was married, and then I was pregnant with my first child. And in those days, there was no extended maternity leave. It was that you took 1 year maximum or you resigned. That was the only option for women. And I thought, the rebel in me thought, well, I want to be a mother for a bit longer than a year. So I resigned, much to the distress of all of my friends and family, who said, how are you going to survive? Because my husband at that stage had just started a mature age apprenticeship. So we were earning $66 a week between us. So I was pregnant with Amy, with our first child, and thought, probably should need to get a little bit of work. So I was doing some supply teaching. I worked at a gym. I worked at a community organisation doing first aid training. And there was an ad in the paper that wanted a phys ed tutor for a new offering in Bundaberg that was an outreach of the predecessor of CQU, the Capricornia Institute of Higher Education. And I threw my hat in the ring to do that tutoring. So that was 1988 when Amy was born. And as I loved it, I actually thought that if I really want to make a difference in education and to the lives of young people, and you can do that by being a teacher, but wow, what an opportunity to do so much more and have more influence if you actually had some influence in teacher education. So I started from that 2 hours a week being a phys ed tutor, and the job grew as my family grew, and I got a degree and I got a master's, and then I graduated with my doctorate. And I guess I just applied for the positions as they came up, and I came into management positions, and then I became Dean of Education for a number of years. When the opportunity came up for a Deputy Vice-Chancellor position in our vet division, I grabbed it, and then obviously we integrated our vocational and our higher ed delivery together into the tertiary education division, and I became the Provost. I became the person who looked after all of our educational delivery. It's a huge job, but it's an amazing privilege, and I believe that the ethos and the goals that I had for education back when I was 8, sitting with my brother on the road, have only grown and have stayed the same in terms of the ethos. And this job allows me to just do so much more. And as I said, it's a privilege to do this job every day.
This is a fantastic story. Thank you, Helen, for sharing. And in your current role, what is your biggest goal?
Look, I guess it's a lofty goal, and I don't take it lightly. It really is to provide quality education and training to people who, without us, may not get the opportunity. So Central Queensland University serves, we have campuses in major cities, we have big international cohorts, we have big domestic cohorts in big cities, but I think where we can actually make the most difference is in regional, rural and remote areas through our little campuses and our satellite, our study hubs, but also high quality distance education, where we actually can make a difference to people who can't get to the city or can't get to big, even rural towns to do their education. So if we can actually lift the aspirations and lift the educational capacities of people in those areas, we start then to bridge the gap between the city and the bush. And the statistics are all out there to show that young and older people from regional areas don't engage in tertiary education as much as the city folk do. So we have lots and lots of undergraduate offerings, but one of the strongest capacity builders that we have is our STEPS and our TEP courses. They're our enabling courses for STEPS is for everyone, TEP is specifically for Indigenous learners, mature age people who come in, didn't get opportunities or dropped out of school or had children or had work commitments or had family commitments, and then decide that they do have that capacity to learn, but they just need that enabling. They need us to bridge that little gap for them, and they go on to higher education and vocational training, and they do amazing things. So every day, the great thing about this job is every day you actually see the outcomes of the work that you do in these amazing people getting jobs and contributing back to their communities, which is it closes the loop.
I can really hear the passion for education and for your role here. And continuing with that, I also wanted to ask you about your motto, onwards and upwards. Could you tell me a little bit more about how you apply it in your professional and personal life every day?
Certainly. So, yes, it has become something that's synonymous with me, and very often it's the way I end a meeting. I think basically it's pretty simple. It's don't dwell on the past. And what I would try to say to my colleagues, especially the leaders within this division, is just don't dwell on the past. Each of us will have an issue or a problem, or we'll make a mistake. It's no use dwelling on it. The only reason we should consider it and reflect on it is so that it doesn't happen again. So what can you learn from the past that brings you into the future? Otherwise, basically don't dwell on the past. I'm a big believer in focusing on the present and focusing on the future. Being positive, I think you need to really be well prepared. We need to support each other. I'm a really big believer in the power of teams. So what you can do alone is fantastic, but if you multiply that out by the members of your teams, especially your senior leaders, you can do amazing things. In terms of the personal life, it's quite funny because I didn't probably realise it then, but a lot of the philosophies that I've used as a teacher, and I still miss teaching every day. I loved it and I love it. Just don't get the chance to do it these days. In bringing up my family, I think I probably used subconsciously those teaching principles and the things that underpin why I feel I was successful in the classroom, or for me it was the oval as a phys ed teacher, was it's really important to instill a sense of resilience in young people, and so not to pander to their every whim, but to actually try and get them to think on how their reactions to people and situations can be effective and how they can actually bring themselves along. And I remember the kids coming home and they would say, I'd say, did you have a good day at school? Oh, yeah, but so-and-so, and whether it was a teacher or whether it was another student, they made me feel really blah, blah, blah. And I would say, no one can make you feel anything. Your reaction to people and the way you think about those interactions, they will actually affect your emotions. The people won't. So you really need to think about the way you're reacting to people. And so you have complete control over your reactions. So don't whinge about other people, making you angry. And then it was quite funny because I had a particular situation at work where I haven't had many of these, but anyway, I must have gone home. This is when they were in high school. I must have gone home and they must have said, "Hey, Mum, how was your day?" And I said, so-and-so really makes me angry because of the decisions that they've made, while they sat there, both of them with the big grin on their face saying, "Hey, Mum, no one should affect your feelings. It's only you who can, your reaction." So, yes, they parroted that back to me. But it's interesting how your home and your work philosophies sometimes can collide.
Absolutely. And do you think that your motto, onwards and upwards, can also apply to academic integrity?
Absolutely. Look, we as higher education institutions, we've always had a strong focus on, I think, integrity holistically, completely. And I will talk about academic integrity, but one of the values at CQU is openness, and that actually involves acting with integrity. And over the years, when people have said to me, when I've had an interview or been talking to students or talking to colleagues or talking at a conference or writing a paper, if people had said to me, what is the characteristic that you define yourself as a person and a leader, personally, for me, I will have always said integrity, because we need to do a lot of things, but if we can't, as a leader, and especially in education, if you can't act with integrity, I don't think you should be a leader. I don't think there's a place for you. So firstly, to answer your question, the notion of integrity and being honest and open and truthful in everything that we do is really important. More recently, in terms of working at the university and making sure that we graduate students who have the capacity to also act with integrity and to know what they're doing, have learnt the skills of their profession, academic integrity has become a much more important part or a much more highlighted part of what we do. So we don't want students to act without integrity. We need to support them so that they can do the work themselves, give them all the information that they need. And I guess for our own reputation and their capacity and their reputation, we have to graduate people who can do the job that have been set for them. So if they don't act with integrity in the way that they engage in university, and if they act in any capacity where they're cheating and they get outcomes that they don't deserve, then that's not great for us, it's not great for them, and they won't last long in their profession. So it's a bit self-defeating.
Of course. And I also wanted to circle back a little. You mentioned that your passion for teaching and for being a teacher. I wanted to ask about what role do teachers play in instilling academic integrity in their pupils, and what do they struggle with in this process?
I think integrity, first of all, starts at home. So I think that parents and caregivers and community have a really big part to play before kids even get to school and while they're at school in the formation of their values and their thoughts about the world and their place in the world. I think that teachers, it's really important that our teachers reinforce the fact of the importance of academic integrity, and that's school teachers and academics as well. And particularly in the higher education and vocational education, our tertiary education sphere, there's ways that we can support our students to try and make sure that they don't engage in anything that breaches academic integrity. So really important that we set out to let them know the importance of them acting with integrity. And there's lots of policies and processes, and they sign declarations on their assessment pieces. But I think it's more than that. It's actually our academics and our leaders being professional and leading by example, but giving students the complete information on the risks if they step outside of academic integrity. But also in a really practical way, we can design, I know some of the research coming out says assessment design won't stop people cheating, but I think we can mitigate some of those potential thinking about, getting someone to help you with an assignment or paying someone to do an assignment if the assessment is really cleverly constructed. And for example, in teacher ed, we have activities where students will take a chunk of knowledge and go away and prepare a presentation so that when they all come back, each student will present their chunk of knowledge and they're assessed by the academic, by the teacher, but they're also assessed by their peers, and their grade, the grade that their peers gives them doesn't go into the grade book, but their peers have to assess them against a set of criteria. And the peers have a section of their grade awarded on how closely they've aligned. So number one, you have to turn up. You have to actually be there. Number two, you have to do it yourself. Nobody can do this for you. And number three, you actually have to have engaged with the criteria. You have to know, those students have to know what they're looking for. So just one example, but I think there's a commitment right across from prevention to assessment to follow-up communication with students. Ultimately, I guess if someone really wants to find a tricky way to cheat, they may, but we have to try our best to mitigate that and support our students.
Absolutely. And speaking of CQUs specifically, what role does academic integrity play in your institutional strategic plan?
Yes. So I guess number one, I'll go back to talking about the values. So even before we get to the strategic plan, one of the values at Central Queensland University is openness, and part of that is acting with honesty and integrity. So it's right there embedded in what we do, the way that we do it at the university. But in terms of the strategic plan, we have a new strategic plan. We have a new Vice-Chancellor this year. And with the Vice-Chancellor and our council, we've structured a new strategic plan, kept the values the same, which I think is fantastic because that's the way a lot of us have grown up at this university with those values. But in terms of we have 6 pillars in the strategic plan, and specifically for integrity and academic integrity, in terms of our students, we've committed to prepare them in a way that they can make the best contribution to the professions into which they're going to work after graduation. So we need to prepare them, as I've said before, they have to do the work themselves. They have to understand the knowledge and skills that they're gaining, not get somebody else to do it. So there's a pillar there in terms of supporting our students to make sure that they will be the best professionals that they can be post-graduation. The pillar about people, our people, is really important, and especially for me as a teacher and as the Deputy Vice-Chancellor who looks after educational delivery, there's a commitment from the university, and I believe it's our responsibility to make sure that our people, in this case our academics, are really well prepared to deliver a curriculum in a really thoughtful and engaging and supportive way to prepare those students. So we need to make sure that we give our academics the skills to be able to explain to students the importance of integrity, but also, if push comes to shove, to be able to identify when there's breaches of academic integrity, and then we have to have the policy framework and the processes that will deal with those breaches, which I believe that we have. So staff capacity building, really important in that pillar. In terms of research, it just goes with another pillar. It goes without saying that if you don't research and report with integrity, then your research can't be based in anything that's going to be taken forward. So really important there that our researchers and our research high degree students understand the responsibility that they have and that we support them to undertake that responsibility. And finally, in the pillar of reputation, it just goes without saying that an institution or a business or an individual who acts without integrity has a poor reputation. So we pride ourselves on the reputation that we've grown in the industry. I think it's really important that we maintain a focus on complete integrity, but a focus on trying to ensure the academic integrity of our students and our researchers to maintain that reputation.
Thank you, Helen. I've learned a lot and I definitely feel inspired.
Terrific.
Everyone, thank you for joining us for this episode of Integrity Matters by Turnitin. Goodbye.